My name is Groucho, and today I wanted to speak to you a little bit about the lore of Magic the Gathering, and specifically about the character Dovin Baan. But first, a quick breakdown. With every new expansion of Magic the Gathering, a certain set of central characters are put center stage to advertise the new cards. First and foremost among these are the Planeswalkers. These are the major figures and central actors of every setting in the Magic universe. Dovin Baan is one of the Planeswalker cards for the new Ravnica Allegiance set. And no wonder. Look at this svelte, sexy turquoise 10 out of 10. Who wouldn't want to slap that vaguely snake-like face on every poster front in the world? What? Oh. Just me then? Planeswalkers tend to be pretty cleanly divided into two camps. The old favorites and, well, everybody else. One of the issues I've had with the Magic storyline over the past couple years is its fixation on an increasingly small set of characters, a group that maps onto superhero teams like the Avengers or the Justice League. In our case, that team is called the Gatewatch, an oath-bound organization that is pledged to defend every plane in the multiverse, which is Magic's name for the many interconnected worlds that make up its universe. Even if you aren't familiar with the Magic storyline, if you know the game, you probably recognize many members of this team. Jace, Chandra, Gideon, and Nissa are some of the central figures. But as these characters take up more airspace and attention, it pushes other, potentially interesting characters out of the central frame, which brings us back to Dovin. Eternal third wheel, lost but not forgotten, emo to the core, the one true blue boy. With the release of Ravnica Allegiance, players saw the return of two, honestly unexpected characters. Kaya the assassin from the Venetian-inspired plane of Fiora, and our friend Dovin, Minister of Inspections from the mechanized world of Kaladesh. What made this so surprising is that we, as players, had been taught over time that while we were meant to be following the dynamic movement and actions of the Gatewatch as they traveled from world to world, sorting out shit that they usually stirred up in the first place, the locals that got left behind could expect exactly that, to be left behind. So the reappearance of Kaya and Dovin marked something of a shift. Okay, but I'm getting ahead of myself again. Maybe it's a good thing that these Planeswalkers never got back on the tour bus. Maybe they're boring characters. Maybe all Dovin does in the downtime is blast those goddamn My Chemical Romance albums while yelling at me that I'm not his real dad. Well, maybe so. But I would argue that, at least narratively speaking, Dovin exists in a long storytelling tradition. He functions, at least in part, as an emblem of the cold, detached scientist who believes their careful analysis exists on a level above all ethical considerations. And this archetype gathers inspiration from real-world examples. Wernher von Braun, an aerospace engineer that pioneered rocketry for Nazi Germany. Yeah, you heard me. I go into the goddamn heart of darkness when I analyze my children's card games, so hitch up or get off. Von Braun had this to say on the ethical component of scientific invention. Science does not have a moral dimension. It is like a knife. If you give it to a surgeon or a murderer, each will use it differently. That's all well and good, Vernie baby, but if you strap a rocket propulsion on a stick of dynamite, there's really only one way that goes down, no matter how good you might look on a launch pad. Cut the tape. Groucho, you promised yourself this would be the year you stop falling for war criminals. I think we have room to be suspicious of Herr Doctor here, if for no other reason than he had a vested interest in being absolved of any responsibility for the uses his inventions had been put to. But Braun's moral blinders are echoed in many popular depictions of scientists. Mary Shelley's novel Frankenstein solidified our vision of the determined innovator who strives to see beyond the constraints of our current social norms and imagines the possibility for a bright new future beyond our prudish constraints. With how many things are we on the brink of becoming acquainted, Victor Frankenstein wonders, if cowardice or carelessness did not restrain our inquiries. It's so easy to imagine those words coming out of the mouth of our slim Vidalcan wonder kid, in part because Dovin is a present-day incarnation of the archetype of the mad scientist that stretches back at least to 1818 when Mary Shelley's novel was first published. But I'd like to focus in here on the we of this sentence. Like with von Braun's quote from a moment ago, what seems like a public declaration really masks a more private impulse. Frankenstein is far less concerned with the genuine progress of wider humankind. He's much more invested in questions concerning his own intellectual powers.
It's moving. It's alive. It's moving. It's alive. Oh, it's alive. It's alive. It's alive. It's alive. Oh, in the name of God. Now I know what it feels like to be God. Oh.
This divide between public perception and private ambition, between expressed ideals and barely repressed desires, is what makes Frankenstein such an interesting character. And Dovin tracks a similar path. Although he comes from a technological background, the field that truly compels him is social engineering, the management of people in accordance with their place and function in society. Dovin values order above all, and he sees individuals as the variables in an incredibly complicated code he has to solve. Which brings us to Ravnica. Ravnica has always been regulated haphazardly by the competition between 10 guilds. Since we last saw Dovin, he has installed himself as Grand Arbiter of the city through political maneuvering. The chaos he finds there is a stark contrast to his ideal system of rule, which he identifies as unified, centralized, and meritocratic. And let's be honest, if you saw this when you left your house in the morning, you might want some sober parental supervision too. Ugh, look at its one oozy googly eye. As with Frankenstein's quest to end mortality, Dovin's methods are easier to criticize than his mission. In an attempt to tame the chaos in the city streets, Dovin deploys a fleet of thopters to act as a complicated surveillance network over the populace, and he employs precognitive mages that can see into the future to allow his police state to arrest would-be criminals before they've had the chance to transgress. The story here makes references to the film version of Philip K. Dick's Minority Report, both in narrative and visual design. And Dovin's plans raise many of the same ethical questions as the pre-crime law enforcement from that movie.
Here we go again.
Look, I'm not with the ACLU on this, Jeff. But let's not kid ourselves. We are arresting individuals who have broken no law.
But they will. The commission of the crime itself is absolute metaphysics. The precogs see the future, and they're never wrong.
But it's not the future if you stop it. Isn't that a fundamental paradox?
Yes, it is. You're talking about predetermination, which happens all the time. Why'd you catch that?
Because it was going to fall.
You're certain?
Yeah.
But it didn't fall. You caught it. The fact that you prevented it from happening doesn't change the fact that it was going to happen.
You ever get any false positives? Someone intends to kill his boss or his wife, but they never go through with it. How do the precogs tell the difference?
Precogs don't see what you intend to do. Only what you will do.
Whether or not we believe in the supposedly perfect technology of the precog visions, they're still subject to human interpretation, which comes with its own biases and prejudices, just as Dovin's social planning does. I'd like to make one last historical comparison here. Benjamin Rush, one of the founders of American medicine, would bleed his patients to what authors Barbara Ehrenreich and Deirdre English call Transylvanian excesses. Rush lived in a time when healthcare was difficult to market, which led to the practice of what they call heroic medicine, a form of treatment that relied heavily on dangerous therapies like bleeding, mercury dosing, and blistering with mustard plasters. The goal was not so much to heal the patient, but to produce dramatic effect, a spectacle you might say, that would be clearly discernible and therefore billable. Rush was often accused of killing more patients than he cured. And he also invented something called the tranquilizing chair, which I'm just too afraid to research exactly what it was used for. I would argue that we can broaden out this term, heroic medicine, to incorporate heroic science more generally, which I would define as a methodology that glorifies the genius or skill set of the practitioner over the validity or value of the results they produce. Frankenstein and Dovin are both guilty of this kind of practice. Dovin is so drawn to the puzzle box of Ravnica's complex social system that he sees it as an opportunity to finally prove the preeminence of his own intelligence. Like Frankenstein, he wants to be able to say,
I know what it feels like to be God.
And it's easy to see why Dovin would want to perform in this way. He comes from the plane of Kaladesh, where the innovative work of scientists is held in the highest possible regard. The folks on Kaladesh cherish intelligence the way we cherish, dollar menu items at fast food chains? They really love it, is all I'm saying. That kind of value system is liable to generate individuals who have trouble distinguishing the performance of genius from its potential practical use for a community. Going forward, it'll be interesting to see if the Magic storyline has any interest in redeeming Dovin's actions. The art book of Ravnica suggests that, at the last minute, Dovin sabotages the device intended to bring Big Baddie Nicol Bolas to the city. Werner von Braun... I may just fan myself for a minute here. Von Braun himself was eventually expatriated out of Germany and transplanted to the US, where he joined NASA and helped to land the first astronauts on the moon. By demonstrating a little more self-reflection, Dovin too could show us how genius can not only be repressive, but liberating as well. Haha, I bet you thought you could get through this video without having to see my face. No such luck. But in all honesty, if you've made it this far, thank you so much for spending the time with me. It means the world. I hope you enjoyed this type of video. It's the first kind of lore/story type video I've ever done, and I'd like to do more of them. I'm really interested in these connections between the Magic storyline and history or other types of storytelling in general. And with that being said, if you have suggestions for things you'd like to see videos on, I'm always open to suggestions in the comments below. The ones I've been thinking about at the moment are either the connections between House Demir and film noir, you know, the kind of anti-hero stereotypes or archetypes that they embody. Or the other one I was thinking about that goes a little bit further back in the lore is the kaiju politics of the Eldrazi, which I think could be really fun both to see and to research. But yeah, if you have suggestions, leave them in the comments below. And thanks again for sticking with me. All right, see you guys.